Last week in President Joe Biden's State of the Union address, he announced the administration's intention to create a big shift in focus on mental health needs, a focus that this topic hasn't had apparently since the Carter administration, according to various things that I've read. The fact sheet on the White House website lays out a strategy to address what they're calling a national mental health crisis. And it's a pretty long list, but I pulled out some of the ones that have a more direct application to you guys and your lives. And let's just toss those around a little bit.
Let's hear it.
All right.
Whip them out.
All right. $700 million in programs that provide training, access to scholarships, and loan repayment to mental health and substance use disorder clinicians committed to practicing in rural and other underserved communities. So that's kind of cool. A big part of this, I gather, was sort of directed at the opioid epidemic. So seems like a good place to put your money.
Regardless of like your stance on politics, Iowa actually has like started the process before the federal government, I guess, in regards to like training, at least for mental health. Like the Iowa psychiatry residency program is planning on expanding the number of seats, as well as forming specific rural psychiatry tracks to try and recruit and retain people to continue to practice in rural areas, which I think is,
I mean, we're one of the more rural states.
All right, awesome. It's wild too. I think, I don't remember what to say. It was like Montana or something like that, where they're like psychiatry. There's one per 100-mile radius and things like that, which is, and I mean, we're seeing something similar like in our state as well, where we have like hotspot cities. There'll be, there's nine. I don't remember the exact statistic, but up to 90 like mental health, providers in the Iowa City Coralville area. Yeah. And there's my hometown there's 0.
Yeah.
And like the next closest one is 40 miles away with.
And it's easy for people living in areas like ours to forget that much of the U.S. is actually pretty rural. There are large portions of the country that are just underserved because of their, combination of their population and just people may or may not want to, providers specifically may or may not want to live in those areas. So this is nice. This is good. We'll see. I mean, a lot of what I'm going to say here isn't something that, Joe Biden can't just wave his magic wand and make happen. So there's a lot to go on here. But here's the next one. $225 million in training programs to increase the number of community health workers and other health support workers providing services, including behavioral health support in underserved communities. So even more money towards mental health. Signing the bipartisan Dr. Lorna Breen Health Care Provider Protection Act into law, which will invest $135 million over 3 years into training healthcare providers on suicide prevention and behavioral health, while launching an awareness campaign to address stigmatization, promote help seeking, and self-care among this workforce.
I don't know. I think I get that like weird mix in my tummy when I hear that for healthcare providers. I think a lot of times like the issue is not like awareness. For example, you know what I'm saying? Almost all like practicing providers know that like we are in like a higher risk group of like suicide and things like that. And at least in my experience, like from what I've seen from like higher education institutions, it's more like training. Here's a like hour-long module on like suicide prevention that we're going to require you to complete, as opposed to like the more like addressing some of like the systemic issues that are like actively impacting these providers. And I know there's not enough money in the world to do this, but what if we like could give people more like rest with that money so that they could use that time to like better like impact their, I don't know. Anyway, that's just, I hear things like that and I feel kind of like
that's great.
But I think it's just such a cultural issue too, more so than a lack of awareness. And I think that one of the things that needs to happen is we just need to like get rid of this like macho-ness that we all have in healthcare and just like talk about it to each other and make it less of a stigmatization to like go see your therapist, go see a psychiatrist. And also, I mean, just like I have been in a lot of from talking to other students, I think I have been in more like death situations than your average med student, partly just like from my NICU interests. And I can think of a single time in this past year where I think I've probably lost close to 10 patients. So I think 1 out of 10, we're at 10% of the time where someone checked in on me, how I was doing after that loss. And in that time, so it was a fellow who checked in on me and the resident who wanted to make sure we were okay. And I actually wanted to process what happened, and the resident kind of shut it down. Like, she's like, oh yeah, we're fine. And then I'm sure I could have gone and sought out that fellow later and talked about it, but as a student, that's kind of like a sketchy thing to do. So I think that doesn't cost money to be like, okay, team, let's debrief for 5 minutes, 10 minutes even.
I have a similar experience, where it's been like there's one patient. There was another patient that we all kind of debriefed about in the emergency department, but it was like a group thing. So I guess 2 patients out of all the patients that I've been involved with their care with that have passed, where somebody's actually asked, are you okay?
Yeah.
And I guess and like to address that, I'm more a fan of like direct payment, like the direct payment type of model. Like, instead of requiring more modules, let's make it easier for people to have that time and space.
Yeah.
Let's like help provide vouchers so that people can seek out care, or let's like use this fund to block off an hour of
Mm-hmm.
time where people like don't have to see patients for their RVUs or whatever, so that they have that time to like debrief and seek care and improve their mental. I don't know. I mean, maybe there's a lot of research that show like online modules.
I doubt it.
Help, but like,
are you skeptical, Abby? Are you skeptical that online modules don't change the world?
I still just remember watching this movie M1 year, and I remember feeling threatened, like you are gonna commit suicide if you don't meditate. And I don't think that was the intention of this module, or the movie we watched. But I think some of these modules send that message of, if you meditate for 1 minute a day, like you're good, or like otherwise you're gonna either get addicted to some kind of substance and kill a patient, or you're gonna die by suicide. And meditation is great and we should practice it, but it's not the cure-all. It's also not for, like, different people need different skills.
I think I vaguely remember what you're talking about.
The fire. Are you thinking of the fire?
I don't know what it was called.
That one didn't have. Having recently watched it, that one was more about like the healthcare in general rather than specific suicide.
So I mean, training. It says training healthcare. I paraphrased all of this off their website, so I don't have the exact wording, but training healthcare providers on suicide prevention. So that's a pretty broad concept there. What does it mean, training healthcare? Does it mean training them to be like, hey, give your folks some time to process? I
don't know.
Is healthcare providers individual people, i.e. go and look at an online module, or is it healthcare providers, the system that they work in? So there's a lot that I don't quite.
I wanted to say one thing that I thought was really cool. A couple of programs I interviewed at had opt-out therapy for residents, where you are scheduled for a therapy session twice a year, and like you don't, like, they're not forcing you to go into it, but it's scheduled for you automatically, and then you can schedule more or something after that, but then it's like at least twice a year someone is asking you, like, are you okay? And then the other thing I thought was cool is there's one residency program that hired a therapist, and this therapist serves all the residents. This was a bigger program, so there's like close to 100 residents, and then every time a patient dies, the therapist is informed and goes and finds the residents and holds like a team debrief session, and then every time you finish an ICU month, you have a session with her. And so I think there are some really cool models like that definitely, I'm sure, can we expand this and get a therapist for every like ICU in this, or even like you can combine ICUs, can share a therapist.
More strengthening existing laws that require all health plans to cover robust behavioral health services with an adequate network of providers, including 3 behavioral health visits each year without cost sharing. So this is more focused on everybody, not just healthcare providers. 3. I don't know why 3, but seems as good a number as any. I think sometimes, I think my gut says, and maybe Nathan, you have more information on this. My gut says that, 3 is not a bad number. I mean, a lot of times if your problem is situational, then 3 might be good.
What was the behavioral? Sorry, I kind of like blacked out a little bit.
You get 3.
You get 3
again, Nathan.
I know, right?
Therapy visits.
3, let's see, 3 behavioral health visits each year without cost.
I mean, there's no like FDA approved like therapy modality that's 3 sessions and you know, like for example, like CBT, like a course of CBT, which is like the most studied like psychotherapy, is like 16 sessions.
Yeah.
Like so I want to say it's better than nothing, but I don't know like a single modality that's
okay.
3 you're good, and there's a ton of studies that show like lower SES people have like higher needs of therapy, high needs of care, more at risk for mental health disorders. And I'm trying to think along the lines of equity, like just everybody need 3, or like how can we try and make sure
balance that equation a little bit. I mean, if Dave doesn't take 3, but Grant needs 6 or whatever, then that's an interesting way to do it.
I think it's great. Like overall, 3 is better than 0.
Yeah.
Can I go? Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say one thought on that though. It could lower the barrier to getting people in the door, because it's free now, and I wasn't gonna do it when I like thought I might have to pay for it, but it is free. Like I could give it a try, and then that could turn into, I don't know. You
more.
said 16.
Right, but then who has the ability to continue?
That's fair. That's fair.
Okay.
I think it's still good.
I have a little tangent here. Okay, I'm wondering, Nathan.
Not allowed. We don't do tangents on the show.
Sorry, Dave. I have a lot of issue with the term behavioral health, because I think that it kind of implies that healthy behavior is the goal of mental health treatment. And I'm curious what you think of this, because in my mind, I'm like, okay, sometimes like I've had like anxiety and I'm behaving perfectly acceptably. Like I am like...
Yeah, does behavioral health have a particular meaning?
And so I think that there are times too where I think it's like we want these people to stop inconveniencing us, whereas what actually I want for people is to be whole and happy and healthy. And just because you're able to function doesn't necessarily mean you don't deserve mental health care. So I'm curious if there is some other rationale for this term.
The like underpinnings I can't like speak to with knowledge. My understanding is like it's more of a catch-all. So like under behavioral health would be like for example, like ABA therapy. So it can include like therapies for people with intellectual disability or autism. It can include like addiction or substance use treatments, which like does involve a behavior. It can include just like normal like psychotherapy. I think the goal was just to try and have a catch-all and to try and like destigmatize, in air quotes, try and like destigmatize people like seeking treatment. So instead of for some people, instead of saying like mental health treatment and like the stigma, so
it's like you just
your
need to behave.
Yes,
I guess I just see that a lot, like in the hospital.
That's because of our parents,
like,
who say things like behave yourself.
No, I'm talking about it even differently in the hospital of like situations where we're like, oh, this patient is just like difficult, or like when they actually have like severe anxiety, and we're saying like the problem is what the patient is doing rather than the problem is actually that the patient is unwell. So that's I think kind of part of where my issue with that term comes from, but I think there's probably other hills can be dying on.
Isn't it?
Plenty of hills for Abby to die on.
I've got a lot.
Wouldn't the idea be more that you're trying to teach them behaviors that help them deal with their unwellness?
I could work with that, although I think some of cognitive behavioral therapy is behavioral and some of it is.
Yeah, and there's a lot of it's not also like behavior focused as well. They just, my understanding was it's like a lump sum umbrella term to encapsulate all types of modalities in different spheres of.
Why don't we just call it brain shit?
Go see your brain shit provider.
Brain shit provider. Clean that shit out.
I'm gonna be brainstorming.
It's like a septic cleaner or something.
Better terms for this, okay? Everyone?
Well, consider that a starting point. My contribution there.
First on my list.
All right.
I'm gonna apply for brain shit residency real quick.
I think there's a bunch more on this page, but one last one that I think this last one will resonate with my M4 friends. Stop discriminatory algorithmic decision making that limits opportunities for young Americans.
Yeah, is that really on there?
It is on there.
That's amazing.
It is on there.
What does that mean?
So there is a growing conversation about algorithms in our lives. So everything from like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, the things that they show us, to the systems that review resumes and CVs in order for you even to get an interview before even a human looks at them. And of course, there is the famous among med students NMRP algorithm that decides in some respects whether or not you match. So I don't know how far that one's gonna go.
Probably not to the match. I don't
you don't think so?
Yeah, did you guys know that the match won a Nobel Prize?
Yeah. The match algorithm.
That shit only takes 15 seconds or something like
Oh,
that.
yeah,
we should have the results back by now.
This is a total like Schrodinger's cat situation. Like my fate is sealed. I just don't have any idea what it is.
There's a great Glockenflecken.
I love that one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, by the time the show comes out, your fate will have been decided.
Yeah. We'll know whether or not we match.
Yeah.
Whether or not we're soaping.
Yeah. And I my heart goes out to all of you. I do think that, of course, most everybody is going to have an awesome outcome, but I can imagine that, you'll be on pins and needles and no matter what. So
good luck.
Yeah.
Good luck,
Thank
guys.
you.
Thanks. I can't whistle. I can't whistle.
What
Somebody
are you trying to whistle?
The Hunger Games.
Oh.
Somebody get the. I can't whistle right now.
What is it like?
There we go.
I'm doing the little
Three fingers.
Yeah.
In the air.